Hello everyone, this is Woodstock Prod. I'm Woodstock, and today I'll be discussing my rankings for all 9 theatrically released Spider-Man films. We're going from the original from Sam Raimi, starring the great Tobey Maguire, to the just-released Spider-Man No Way Home from producer Kevin Feige, starring the one and only Tom Holland. I'll be actively spoiling every film in this series except for No Way Home, as it was just released this month. So if you haven't seen that one yet, you're safe here. So with all that said, take it away, Doctor Strange.
Now, shall we begin?
Number 9, Spider-Man Homecoming. I want to stress something before we go any further. I do not think there has been even one bad Spider-Man movie in the almost 20 years this character has been on screens. Now that said, I didn't have high hopes for this movie back in 2017, but when I finally saw it, I really liked it. But then I watched it again for this video, and it really fell off for me. I'm not sure what happened. I've rewatched the movie before and liked it, but I feel like after seeing Marvel really shake things up this year with their Disney Plus shows and their other theatrical films, Homecoming feels a lot more basic. Michael Keaton is still absolutely amazing as the Vulture, and the scene where Tom emerges from the parking garage that Vulture trapped him under is incredible as well. But the more MCU-isms of the film just didn't really click with me as much. I get why a Peter who's grown up in the MCU would want to join the Avengers, but honestly, I don't think a Peter desperate to be an Avenger and to be validated by Tony Stark is all that interesting. I think a Peter Parker who was already an adult in this universe would be a much more interesting character. But Marvel and Sony decided to go a different direction, and there's nothing anyone can do about that, and that's not the fault of Director John Watts, nor is it the fault of any of these screenwriters. And Tom Holland himself still crushes in this role. He plays Peter as someone who is just a good kid who wants to help out. And I really enjoy his friendly neighborhood Spider-Man angle in the early half of this movie, or how he and the Donald Glover character just kind of chat about which delis they prefer in their local area. It's a lot of good stuff. It's a lot of fun stuff. So overall, Homecoming as a movie I thought would be a 4 out of 10. That I almost gave an 8 out of 10 to. That now I'm going to give a 6 out of 10 to. Number 8. Spider-Man Far From Home. Don't worry, Tom Holland fans, I see you lighting your torches and sharpening your pitchforks. I don't care for these first 2 movies, but you will see the third one much higher up this list. I actually think I might like Homecoming more than this. There's a lot more of these MCU-style jokes that are trying to be cute, but are just insufferable. Like, when characters call Peter's spider sense his Peter tingle, or the way they make Nick Fury act in this movie, or how the world-changing implications of the snap and the blip are just kind of played for laughs. These are just things that I really don't like. But the thing that makes me want to put Far From Home much higher up is the stuff with Mysterio. Just like with the Vulture in Homecoming, Jake Gyllenhaal's Mysterio is pitch perfect, especially with the entire sequence at the second act end, where he does just these amazing illusions that just so thoroughly mess with your head as much as they do Peter's. I really can't stand the idea that Tony would just entrust Peter with the Edith drones, let alone even make such a thing, to be honest. But I do like the story of Peter wanting to live up to the example left by Tony, a man he hero worshipped. He has an even greater power than ever before, so now he has an even greater responsibility than ever before, and he's struggling underneath the weight of it before Happy graciously takes it off his shoulders and says, "This is not, should not, nor does it have to be, your responsibility." I really hated this movie when I watched it 2 years ago, but it's really risen in my estimation since then. It's still not one of my favorites, but I don't really hate it anymore. I'm going to give Spider-Man Far From Home a 6.5 out of 10. Number 7. The Amazing Spider-Man. Everyone was saying in 2010 that Spider-Man didn't need to be rebooted. Then the publicity photos in 2011 were released and people were still saying Spider-Man doesn't need to be rebooted. Then the movie actually dropped and people kept saying, I mean, yeah, it's good, but it still didn't need to be rebooted. And I would say I was in that camp also, but leaning more towards it's good than it didn't need to be. And I still stand by that sentiment. And I really like The Amazing Spider-Man, but I don't like it the same way I did in 2012. And in 2014, I really felt burned by that sequel back then. I still enjoyed the original, but, now the two have kind of flipped in my estimation. I love Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. I love Andrew and Emma Stone's chemistry. I love the more tactile feel of the action. I really enjoy Rhys Ifans as the Lizard. I really enjoy the score by James Horner, but I also just can't stand the ending. The Lizard kills Gwen's father, and with his last breath, he makes Peter promise to stay away from Gwen because he knows that Peter being Spider-Man will put Gwen in danger. And when Captain Stacy's funeral is held, Peter refuses to attend. Gwen then goes to Peter's home and confronts him for not being there for her, and then the next day at school, Peter basically tells Gwen he wants to get back together. Bad. This is bad. Flip this. Go to the funeral, then afterward tell Gwen, we can't be together anymore. I'm sorry. And I also really don't care for what ends up being Uncle Ben's death. I get that they wanted to shake up the formula from the first Spider-Man film in 2002, and then that we saw recreated in 2007. I get it, but I don't like it. Peter letting the robber pass because he was scammed out of the money he was contractually owed is petty, but you get why he'd do it. Peter letting the robber go because the cashier was kind of a dick to him? That's the wrong kind of petty. That's just being a crappy person. And Ben being killed because he wrestled the robber for his gun is way more needlessly dramatic than Ben being killed because he refused to give his car to the robber. I have other quibbles, but honestly, at the end of the day, I do really like this movie. If you were going to hit the reset button on a franchise people were loving, this was a pretty good way to do it. I'm going to give The Amazing Spider-Man a 6.75 out of 10. Number 6. The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I saw this movie in theaters for my 20th birthday back in 2014, and I remember being really disappointed with it. Going into this rewatch, though, I was suddenly reminded by a lot of what was going on in my life at that time. I dropped out of college, I was dealing with a relationship with a really toxic girl, so a movie where Peter and Gwen are dealing with their relationship drama, it just wasn't for me. Especially when it ended with such a beautiful, sweet, and intelligent young woman dying at the end. And coming back to it now, I've really come around on it. It's still not my favorite, but I appreciate it a whole lot more. Emma and Andrew's chemistry is to die for. As far as Electro goes, while Jamie Foxx's character is a bit campy, he honestly makes up for it big time with just how freaking powerful he is. Imagine someone as unstable as Max Dillon, but with the power to control, manipulate, and absorb electricity. That's very dangerous, and they show you how dangerous it is. Dane DeHaan's Harry is a really underrated character in my opinion. He does really give a great balance of being Peter's friend, being an angsty rich kid, and then being a desperate man searching for a cure while on borrowed time. And while I don't love the design for this Goblin character, and I find the actual voice Dane uses a little too odd, I really do just like how effective this guy is as a villain. At this point, Dane's Goblin was the first villain to actually get what he wanted. He wanted to hurt Peter in the worst way possible, which brings us into the moment that everyone remembers from this movie, Gwen's death. I still say that if they wanted to do this, they should have held off until the part 3, trick the audience into thinking she's going to be fine, she'll be safe and happy. Don't tease us repeatedly from the minute Captain Stacy breathed his last breath. Just wait and then drop the bomb on us. That said, though, the scene is so beautifully done and wonderfully sad, and Andrew's acting in this scene is just soul-crushing. And on a far, far later note, I really do love the score by Hans Zimmer. I love how it largely excuses a lot of the elements of a traditional orchestral score in favor of something very influenced by modern music. Lots of indie rock, lots of electronic music. It's very 2014. While I complimented James Horner's score in the previous entry, Hans Zimmer's theme for Spidey here is just one of my favorite things in the world, and I just love any score that includes an electric guitar. I'm going to give The Amazing Spider-Man 2 a 7 out of 10. Number 5. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Oh boy, if the Holland fans weren't coming for my throat, I'm pretty sure everyone else is now. So, to put it plainly, no, this isn't the best Spider-Man movie in my book, but you know what it is? pretty darn great. Spider-Verse is easily a triumph of style over substance. This story itself is pretty basic in my experience. It's your average children's fantasy movie, but with superheroes instead of dragons. A story this simple is pretty hard to screw up, and not only do these creators easily avoid screwing up, they manage to create a really compelling visual beast while they're at it. And moreover, I just love all these characters. I love Chris Pine as the perfect Peter from Miles' universe. I love Jake Johnson as the very not perfect, very flawed, very, very deeply relatable Peter B. Parker. I love the fact that they brought in John Mulaney and Nicolas freaking Cage as Spider-Pig and Spider-Man Noir, not just because it's those two awesome people as those two very fun characters, but also because they actually do a pretty good job as the two Peters. Kimiko Glenn is an actress I don't know too well, but I really enjoyed her work as Penny Parker, the anime girl from the future, who fights crime not with spider powers, but with a spider mech that she pilots. It's really cool. And of course, all praise is reserved for Shamik Moore as Miles Morales, who does a terrific job showing Miles' confusion and vulnerability when he's just now figuring out what the hell his powers are, and if he can even stand up to the example left by his universe's Peter Parker. And then he does such a brilliant job showing the unbridled confidence when Miles finally puts the pieces together and unlocks his true potential. And as much as I love that of these last 4 movies on this list, I'm not sure there's going to be a moment that's quite as epic as the What's Up Danger scene. I'm going to give Spider-Verse a 7.25 out of 10. Number 4, Spider-Man 3. You know, it's funny, I was DMing a friend on Twitter, and I told him I have Spider-Verse between Spider-Man 3 and the Amazing Spider-Man 2, and he straight up said, "Wait, you didn't like Spider-Verse?" It's not that I dislike Spider-Verse. I'm just a huge mark for the Sam Raimi films because, I mean, how could you not be? They're wonderful. This is probably the weakest of the Tobey Maguire films, but even for a pretty weak entry, I'd easily put this over a huge chunk of the comic book movies that have come after it. Dark Phoenix, Dark Knight Rises, the Ant-Man films, the Thor films, the Captain America films, Iron Man 2 and 3, both Suicide Squads, y'all can keep them because I've got true cinema right here. And some of you might say, the movie with Tobey's weird dancing, the movie that sets up Harry to be the big bad, but then gives him amnesia right after the fact, the movie that introduced Venom but only used him for a whopping 15 minutes, the movie that retcons Uncle Ben's killer to be the Sandman, the movie that says Harry Osborn's butler knew Norman killed himself the entire time, and I'll look you dead in the face and tell you with a smile, abso-frickin-lutely. Because while it has all of that, it also does Black Suit Spidey really well. You can see Peter's far more aggressive than he ever was before. And I actually like how it doesn't just make Spider-Man an angrier hero inclined towards greater violence. It also turns Peter into a straight-up obnoxious jerk. Sure, the extra nerve helps his career, but it also made him much more vindictive. Not just what he does in the jazz club, but also when he confronts Brock at the Bugle, he's just reveling in destroying this guy's career. He's enjoying himself so much. And I really like how Sam Raimi basically took Topher Grace and made his Eddie Brock just an evil version of Peter Parker. If you took Tobey's Peter and just removed all integrity and self-awareness from him, just surgically cut that out, and all that was left was an overly ambitious dork who will lie, cheat, and steal to get whatever he wants, that's basically this Eddie. And I really do like how this movie shows that being a dork with integrity doesn't give you a free pass to be unaware of what's going on around you. Peter's career has been on an upswing, so he just gets this vibe that if he's happy, everyone's happy. What's there to be unhappy about? He's too caught up in his own success to realize that MJ is not enjoying the same. Her career as an actress is taking a downswing, and it's really messing with her emotional health. And Peter can't see that because his head is too far up his own ass to see anything. And I like that it takes nearly losing himself and being brought back down to earth to make Peter wake up and realize he's been ruining the one thing he's always wanted since he was probably 6 years old. And on top of all, the action scenes in this film are just so great, and Christopher Young, the legend behind the Hellraiser score, does an excellent job filling in for Danny Elfman. So yeah, I'm going to give Spider-Man 3 a 7.5 out of 10. Number 3, Spider-Man No Way Home. Okay, are we cool now, Tom Holland fans? Can I step back from this wall of bulletproof glass? Can we be friends now? Okay. Okay. Anyway, here's the part where I'm going to tread lightly. Willem Dafoe, Alfred Molina, Thomas Hayden Church, Jamie Foxx, and Rhys Ifans all return as their respective villains from their respective films, and they all slip back into their roles like no time has passed at all. Especially impressive with Dafoe and Molina, since these men hadn't been Osborn and Octavius in well over a decade at this point. I actually find Strange's presence in this film to be far less intrusive than Talos/Nick Fury and Tony Stark/Tony Stark were in Far From Home and Homecoming. I actually really like Peter's supporting cast this time around. I've always liked Ned. I've always wanted to like Zendaya's MJ and Marissa Tomei's Aunt May, but they've never really clicked with me until this movie. Now I really do like where their characters went here. And Tom Holland gives his best performance so far as Peter/Spider-Man. He's not just being the sweet good boy who just wants the best for everyone around him. He actually has moments where he really wants something for himself. He's not concerned with the world around him. He just cares about himself and his inner circle, and it goes back to bite him on the ass. So, he does the thing Spider-Man always has to do. Buckle down and take responsibility, and do what you can to resolve what needs to be resolved. I really can't wait to see what they do with Tom in the future after this movie, and the movie itself is a work of art. I want to spoil it so desperately, but that would be a very impolite thing to do at this time. So if you want to talk spoilers, hit me up on Twitter. I'm going to give Spider-Man No Way Home an 8 out of 10. Number 2. Spider-Man 2. And now we get into the top 2. And I'm betting most people are surprised this isn't number 1. And I get why, because this is an inarguable masterpiece, and it is worthy of every bit of praise it gets, and maybe just a little bit more. While I have the preceding film up a bit higher, this is most definitely Tobey Maguire's best performance in this franchise. The whole thread within the film is Peter deciding that he cannot and will not continue to be Spider-Man. He has no desire to be a hero who does his best and gets so much grief from his friends and family for not being there when Peter Parker needs to be there, only to just get as much grief from the press as Spider-Man for apparently being some kind of monster. Peter decides that this crap isn't his responsibility, and he's going to go out and do what he wants and take care of what he needs. But he can't. The harder he tries to ignore the world around him, the more the world shoves it in his face until he just can't ignore it anymore. And on the flip side, you have Alfred Molina's Dr. Octopus, a man so obsessed with what he wants that he ignores the needs and well-being of others. He nearly destroys the entirety of New York City just to make his dreams become reality, but when slapped with the cold hard truth by Peter, he realizes the same thing the young man has had to learn as well. There are some things more important than your dreams, and to quote Fantine from Les Mis, there are some dreams that cannot be. And after a whole movie of Peter and MJ struggling with whether or not they can or even should be together, it really is the most satisfying thing to see them making out in Peter's apartment before hearing sirens, and MJ gently smirks at Peter and tells him, "Go get him, Tiger." An iconic scene, a spectacularly and amazingly iconic scene. I'm going to give Spider-Man 2 a 9 out of 10. Number 1. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man from 2002. Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man film is a perfect origin film. It's the perfect story of how a normal kid becomes a superhero. Tobey Maguire kills it from start to finish. He sells the pathetic nerd at the start of the film. He sells the somewhat more self-assured average Joe later on, the sheer joy and excitement at realizing you can climb walls and shoot webs, and he crushes it as the cocky, self-assured superhero who can do anything in the world. Willem Dafoe crushed it in 2021, and he crushed it just as hard back in 2002. He has a serious argument the best comic book movie villain of all time in both this movie and in No Way Home. And Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane really is just wonderful. I've never really gotten why people give her such a hard time, because she seems like a genuinely lovely and nice woman who just wants to be someone who's treated like she's actually worth something, and not just because she's pretty, but because she's a human being. And Cliff Robertson and Rosemary Harris really were just the perfect casting for Uncle Ben in anime. There's a reason SpiderVerse just reused Robertson's audio from this movie instead of casting another actor. They got it right the first time. I know most people who prefer the Raimi films tend to prefer Spider-Man 2, and while I don't agree, I completely understand. It's a masterpiece. But you know what? I think this movie just might be that, but even more so. I'm going to give the original Spider-Man a freaking 10 out of 10. So, that's my ranking for this series. Do you agree? Disagree? Comment down below with your own rankings, and let's have a fun little discussion here. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review, and if you did, well, I already told you to comment, so like and subscribe and share the video with your friends. Or heck, dislike if you feel so inclined. I won't see it now. Nothing can hurt me anymore. My life is nothing but a comedy. So, on that note, please check out my unscripted review for Joker from 2019, or more appropriately, my review for the original Spider-Man film, or hey, Tom Holland's Spider-Man and likes his Star Wars, why not give my Star Wars videos a watch? I've done videos about all the Disney films, plus a video comparing the finales for the 5th, 6th, and 7th seasons of Star Wars The Clone Wars. Check that out if you want to. But for now, I've also got plenty of other comic book movies to talk about. I've discussed Zack Snyder's DC trilogy, the Justice League theatrical cut, Marvel and Ryan Coogler's Black Panther, Deadpool 2, Alita Battle Angel, the Blade trilogy, the original Suicide Squad film, Shazam, Hellboy 2019, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, and Avengers Infinity War. You can check all of those out in a playlist down below. I'll be back again soon with my video for my favorite movies from 2021. And then next month I'll be returning with a compilation video for all of my upcoming TikToks discussing WWE's Royal Rumble. Until then, have a great day, everyone. I hope you all have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Woodstock, out.
Hey, Coat. Coat, wake up. Wake up. You didn't talk about the Venom movies.
Venom movies? Yeah, 12 out of 10, both of them. Absolute cinema perfection. That's all. Okay, good night. Merry Christmas.